I remember the first time I played Sonic CD. I was bored at school, I found it on the App Store, got home, started playing, and I hated it. It was confusing, convoluted, frustrating, and a mess to navigate. Not exactly the most comfy introduction to Sonic. And yet, despite that, I kept playing it. Something about it was so alluring, so striking that I couldn't help but play it again and again and again. And after all these years, yes, I've gotten quite fond of the game, but I still can't fully explain how I feel about it and what I think of it. But alas, I have a lot of things I want to say about it. So, it's about time I finally rip into Sonic CD. This game doesn't really have a place in the Sonic timeline. It's kind of its own story. The game opens with an animation of Sonic rushing through the plains as he makes his way to a lake where a small planet called Little Planet appears over said lake once a year. Once he arrives there, he finds the planet chained to a mountain and mechanized. As it turns out, Dr. Robotnik had gotten onto Little Planet and stole the game's signature MacGuffins, the Time Stones. And by doing so, he screwed over the planet's future. So Sonic sets out to rid the planet from Robotnik's influence, and that's it. It's a simple story, but it doesn't get in the way, and I can appreciate the fact that it paves the way for the unique game design. But most importantly, the best part of the opening is the animation. It's awesome. At least in the remake. On the original hardware, it was mega compressed. It had a max color count of 16. 16 whole colors. Ouch. Speaking of the animation, did you know the guys who made the opening and ending animation were the same guys who animated the G1 Transformers cartoon? Just a little fun fact. But anyway, neither the animation nor the story matters, because upon entering the first stage, Sonic CD immediately hits you with its two best qualities: the visual and sound design. The visuals are something I've never seen in another video game. It's weird, psychedelic, almost ethereal in nature. In Collision Chaos, the ceiling is mirrored with the floor, almost like the level is at the center of the earth. In Tidal Tempest Act 1, you get a brief glimpse of the outside, a rocky, dark volcano valley, before plunging into the watery depths. Metallic Madness is like one big motherboard. It's certainly designed like one, but we'll get there when we get there. Quartz Quadrant is at first a dense rock-filled cave, but opens up to a waterfall-heavy cliffside. But the greatest of these zones is Stardust Speedway, a dense, twinkling purple city below. Massive green and yellow lights shine onto the winding roads in the sky. Boosters launch shotgun shells when you hit them. The fences create sparks when you run past them at great speed. And the roads have brass horns and keys lining them, almost like the level itself is one massive instrument. It's gorgeous, and it's very easy to see why it's become a staple of the series. And this is without mentioning the different time zones. Every single one has its own unique design accompanying it. Just looking around is a joyous experience in itself. Which brings me to the music. I was going to explain my thoughts on the Japanese and American soundtrack, but I'll let it speak for itself. Needless to say, a good chunk of songs from both soundtracks are in my daily music playlist. In fact, I love the music so much I often avoid getting invincibility or speed shoes because they interrupt it. Alright, I've sang the game's praises up to this point, so why am I so conflicted about it? Well, the level design is where it gets complicated. Typically in a linear stage-based 2D platformer, each level introduces a gimmick, enemy, or hazard exclusive to it. That concept is used and experimented with to increase the challenge as the level goes on, until the end where it reaches a climax, and the level ends, and then you move on to another concept by the next level. It's a working formula, practically a science at this point. And all the Sonic series does this, except this one. The levels in this game are huge, convoluted, and the gimmicks that should be the central focus of the design just exist to exist. Literally, they'll throw anything at you. Random spikes, random enemies, random geometry, anything you can think of. Even in levels where there is a main focus like Quartz Quadrant and Wacky Workbench, the main gimmick doesn't build to anything. The stage design is so strange that the best way to describe it is AI generated. It's without focus, big, and cluttered. And when I say big, I mean big. Look at this! This is one act of a single zone. And there are 4 different versions of it, all with different level design. Not to be completely unfair to the game, it does have occasional moments of brilliance, but the point still stands. Because the levels are so big and clustered with things, this leads to the levels having very start and stop pacing, which is very unfortunate when considering the main mechanic of the game, time travel. Littered throughout the stage are past and future signposts. Once you pass over one, you have to maintain speed for a few seconds to successfully travel through time. Now, this sounds perfect for a Sonic game considering the whole point of the series is to go fast, but because of the aforementioned start and stop pacing, making organic time warps are rare and impractical. And it seems like the devs knew this, as there are parts of some stages that solely exist to allow you to time travel, which just feels sloppy. Again, to give some credit, it's still surprisingly fun to find these little spots where you can time travel using a spring or with the level design itself. But it's still a major problem that handicaps the experience when you can't make a warp because the game feels stingy. On a few occasions, you get the opposite problem, time traveling when you don't want to. This is far more rare than the aforementioned problem, but it still sucks if you're trying to get the good ending. Speaking of the good ending, how do you get it? To get the good ending, you must do one of 2 things. Go to the past in every stage and destroy the robot generator, or collect 50 rings and enter a special stage to get the time stones. Now if you decide to go after the generators, just save yourself the trouble and get the time stones, as not only the special stage is fun, but getting the generator is a pain. Not only do you have to time travel with the unreliable level design, but finding the generator is a task within itself. Now sometimes the generator is really satisfying to find, like the ones in Palm Tree Panic. But the other ones, like in Metallic Madness, don't even bother. You'll get farther tying your dick to a ceiling fan. But getting the time stones is far easier since rings and shields are everywhere, meaning it's trivial to get 50 rings. The special stages themselves are fun. They start off easy enough, but the last 3 are pretty tough. Just remember that if you have less than 20 seconds, a UFO will spawn in the middle of the arena. If you destroy it, you'll get extra time. Once you get all the time stones, you'll always have good futures for the rest of the game, so there's no real point in traveling to the past or future. About those futures, I'm going to bring up a point that no one has ever mentioned. The bad future has the best level design in the game. There are speedy set pieces, the levels have good pacing, and the enemies complement the design, which is unfortunate for the good future because the level design is essentially the same but without the enemies. I find it kind of ironic that the game wants you to get a good future and yet you'll have a much better play experience if you just ignore the extra objectives and make a bad future. Now up to this point, I've just explained the level design is better, but the best way to illustrate this is through the use of an example. Palm Tree Panic Act 3. Most of the design is the exact same, except for the last part. In the good future, you launch off the spring, go through a loop, and hit a wall. Unless you know the wall is there, you're just gonna hit it. But in the bad future, you launch off the spring, get shot through 2 back-to-back loops, and fly directly into the boss arena. What a rush. Oh yeah, the bosses. They're not worth talking about. They're trivial and kind of boring, especially the first one. I mean, what is this? But regardless, see what I mean? It's far more seamless compared to The Good Future, meaning there's no good reason to get a good ending aside from it make me feel good. Despite everything I've said, I don't hate the game. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's my favorite of the classic series, and it's precisely because of all the weird design decisions laced throughout the game that make it so fun. If there was a music track that perfectly described how I feel about the game, it's Collision Chaos Present US. In fact, it's basically a microcosm of, well, everything about the game. It's such a strange song that it doesn't even sound like it has a main melody. Yet that strangeness is what makes it so special, leading it to be my second favorite song out of both the soundtracks. I'm gonna die. Finally being done with this project. Now, so fun fact, I started 4 different video projects before this one. Getting this point was hell. For the 2 squirrels and 1 crack addict that found this, thanks for watching. I promise that the rest of the videos won't take so long. Oh, and if you're wondering why I didn't play as Tails, it's because I like the Super PL too much.
Hey, My dick! My dick! They shot my dick!
Not again.
I can't feel my penis anymore. Medic. I meant they shot my medic, not my dick.